attentive. At that time, a man came to Jesus, kneeling down and saying unto him, Teacher, I brought you my son to you, for he has a dumb spirit, and whenever it seizes him, it dashes him down, and he foams and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid. And I asked your disciples to cast it out, and they were not able. And Jesus answered him, O faithless generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Bring him to me. And they brought the boy to him. And when the spirit saw Jesus, immediately it convulsed the boy, and it fell to the ground and rolled about, foaming at his mouth. And Jesus asked his father, How long has he had this? And he said, From childhood, and it has often cast him into the fire and into the water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have pity on us and help us. And Jesus said to him, If you can believe, all things are possible to him who believes. Immediately the father of the child cried out and said with tears, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. And when Jesus saw that a crowd came running together, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, You dumb and deaf spirit, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again. And after crying out and convulsing him terribly, it came out, and the boy was like a corpse. So the most of them said, He is dead. But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and arose. And when Jesus had entered the house, his disciples asked him privately, Why could we not cast it out? And Jesus said to them, This kind cannot be driven out by anything but prayer and fasting. And they went out from there and passed through Galilee. And Jesus would not have anyone know it, for he was teaching his disciples, saying to them, The Son of Man will be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him, and after he is killed, he will rise on the third day. Glory to you, O Lord. Glory to you. The Holy Spirit will come on you, and the power of the Most High, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. Please be seated. Glory to Jesus Christ.
Glory.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Today, on the fourth Sunday of Lent, we celebrate a man who wrote a piece of work that has echoed throughout the ages since he wrote it. Originally, St. John, and Climacus is not his last name. Climacus means the ladder. But St. John wrote about a ladder of divine ascent. I'm going to read to you a portion of step 9. The ladder of divine ascent is a work that details a journey towards God, a journey towards Christ. 33 rungs, one for each year of life that Jesus lived before his ministry. He describes in 3 different sections, and in the biggest section of the book, he describes the passions, the things that we struggle with, the things that we battle with. Now, even though each one of these steps are listed in some sort of chronological order, 1 through 30, you got to understand and remember that just because something is number 1 and something is number 30 doesn't mean that you're not going to climb the rungs of the ladder over and over again during your journey. That's the thing that you got to understand, is that you are going to climb the rungs many times throughout your life. Now, he goes into detail about all of the steps, but this is from step 9. Remembrance of wrongs is the consummation, and consummation means perfection. Remembrance of wrongs is the perfection of anger, the keeper of sins, hatred of the righteousness, ruin of virtues, poison of the soul, worm of the mind, shame of prayer, stopping of supplication, estrangement of love, a nail stuck in the soul, pleasureless feelings, beloved, and the sweetness of bitterness, continuous sin, unsleeping transgression, hourly malice. The dark and hateful passion, remembrance of wrongs, is one of those that are produced but have no offspring. That is why we do not intend to say much about it. He who has put a stop to anger has also destroyed remembrance of wrongs, because childbirth continuously while the father is alive. So I'm going to hand this so everybody can take a look at it. And as you look at that closely, as it's coming back around, I want you to think about the words that I just wrote. That's just one of the middle part of the rungs that St. John talks about. Now, if you read through the rungs, there is nowhere on the rungs that it talks about murder, right? Why is that? Because somebody who commits murder has hatred and anger within them. So you got to understand that even though some of the things that lead to other things are not on there, but it's the root of those things that we got to really work on. And he describes in detail, in just that short synopsis of anger, what it really does to you, right? It's a worm to the mind, right? We've seen what worms do to food and what worms do to wood, right? You've seen termites, but those are the worms that are in there that started it all. And you've seen all those things happening. And he describes that action of anger to remembrance of wrongs, to doing that to your mind. Can you imagine? Just put it for a second a visual, having that worm of anger just borrowing its way through the white material in your mind, right? Obviously, he's talking more of the spiritual aspect of it, but it gives you a really wonderful view and understanding of it. And the icon is up here a little bit clearer in detail, but that one's a little bit different, because as you're looking at that icon, you can see that there are men going up the rungs, and obviously it was written for an ascetic crowd, but it doesn't matter because we're all on the ladder together, right? We got to remember that he's not on the ladder by himself. And that particular icon, towards the top, has a priest there, and that's supposed to be John Climacus himself. Okay? So he is way up there on the rungs, but I doubt if he would have been, when he was alive, if somebody would have been writing that icon, he would have never put himself that high on the rung. I hope that one day I can be there, right? But if you look closely on the 9th rung of that icon, one of those guys is being pulled off from that ladder. And if you look, there are dark figures that are surrounding the ladder, and those dark figures are pulling these guys with ropes and shooting guys with arrows, and they're falling down at the very bottom. In this icon, it describes a little better because it has a dragon at the bottom, but there's an old man at the very bottom of that icon. And some of those monks are going into the mouth of that old man. That's Satan. That's our enemy, waiting to devour us. And those arrows that are being launched into the air, some of those things are hitting us and threatening to pull us off of our journey towards the very top of the ladder. Now, where it shows St. John Climacus, that figure of the priest, can you imagine that number 28 is prayer? That's prayer. 28th rung of the ladder is prayer. Why is it so high up there? Because it is so hard to attain prayer. Yeah, I pray. I pray every day. I pray for everybody every day. I spend time in prayer. But still, there are things that hold me back from truly becoming the man that I need to be. right? The first step of the ladder is detachment from the world. And a lot of times some people say hatred of the world or death of the world. I get where they're coming from, right? But we who are here living in the world, we must understand that it's the kingdom of heaven that's here now. That's what Jesus taught. The kingdom of heaven is here. And we are supposed to be citizens of paradise. Because you got to remember that paradise, the Garden in Eden, right? That place that we always imagine being some small garden is actually the expanse of heaven. It's the expanse of heaven. And on the antithesis, on the outside in the wilderness, is where we live. When Adam and Eve were exiled from paradise, a lot of times people think it was an angry and vengeful God that cast them out. But that's not true. That's the farthest from the truth. The truth of the matter is after Adam and Eve ate of the apple, or whatever fruit they were, but it's most famous, the apple, whatever fruit it was, and Eve gave it to Adam, the first thing that happened is God came and questioned them. What have you done? He gave them an opportunity, right? And what did Adam do? The most famous of my things that I like saying, it was the woman that you made me do, right? I've said that many times about my wife. It's the woman that you gave me that made me do it, right? And then he gives Eve a chance too. And Eve says, what does she say? It's the serpent that you created. He made me do it, right? Instead of taking ownership for what they did, instead they cast the blame, and it became a record of wrongs. That anger for them making that choice cast all of us into the choice of where we are now. And the hardest thing, one of the most challenging things to do, is not only forgive, but to erase the wrongs. Because a lot of times I've heard the statement, I will forgive, but I will never forget. Well, as long as you do that, as long as you have that mentality, that worm is going to burrow into your mind. It's the poison of the soul. It's a poison. It's a toxin, right? Toxins and poisons are two different things. Venoms are different things, but anger constitutes all of them because it affects us in different ways. And it's step 9 on the wrongs. And I would dare say that the only way that St. John was able to write any of this is, what I understand is I'm going through my journey in the priesthood and I'm preaching and I'm helping people, is I'm going through the same things that he was going through, just like you are going through the same things that I'm going through. I am here as well. And that's why when I stand at the altar, my back is to you. Because we're all going in the same direction. We're all fighting the same things. And St. John, for him to go through each of the rungs of the ladder in such detail means that he realized in his mind that he was not affected just by sex or anger or whatever it is that we struggle with. He was affected by all of it. And one way or another, he was affected by every single sin that was out there, because Satan, he's going to do whatever it takes to derail us from our journey with God. He's going to use everything at his disposal. He's going to use our spouses. He's going to use our children. He's going to use every single thing. Our food, right? He's going to use every single thing. Because I know myself, one of my fallbacks is, lo and behold, when I get anxious or stressed out, I end up eating when I don't need to, and I fight with that gluttony. And that gluttony is the thing that I have struggled with, and that's one of the rungs on the ladder as well. It's fasting, right? Learning how to fast. Today in the gospel reading, Jesus, he is talking to his disciples, and somebody brings their child to Jesus to heal him of a demon. This demon had been in that child for years. Cast him into the water, cast him into the fire. That demon had been in there for years. and no one was able to do it. And this guy, when he saw his disciples, Jesus' disciples, he said to himself, man, I've got a chance to take care of my child. I've got a chance to take care of him. And he brings his child to the disciples, but lo and behold, they couldn't do anything. And when Jesus came to the man, he says, Lord, if you can do something, please take care of this. I brought him to your apostles, your disciples, but they weren't able to do it. And Jesus said, how long am I going to be with you? How long am I going to be here? How long am I going to be guiding you in order to teach you what it is that you need to do? And he tells the man, if you believe, if, that word is a very powerful word, if you believe, everything is possible with God. There's nothing impossible with God. Everything's possible. Right? Jesus is saying this because he is the impossible, made flesh. Yesterday we celebrated the Annunciation, where the Archangel Gabriel comes to the Virgin and says, rejoice, you have been selected. All of us, we often think to ourselves, there is no way that I can be Saint Demetrious. There's no way I can be Saint John. There's no way I can be Saint Christopher and Anthony. But I want to tell you that the Virgin Mary became one of those people that it was impossible to become. She was that person. She walked so in line with her Father in heaven that she was able to bring our Father from heaven into the earth. Through her, the limitless expanse of God, the uncontainable, became contained in her womb. And only those women who have been able to have children and have children now can truly understand the experience it is to have a life within you. But can you imagine just for a second, as Jesus is talking, you got to remember his mother followed him in different places, watching him, and she knew the whole time his destination was somewhere that was going to bring her heartache, because that's what Simeon told her the day that they brought Jesus into the temple. The sword is going to go through your heart. And all along she prayed, and she kept fasting and vigilance to trust God. Because I don't know about you, but seeing my child go through anything like that would bring me heartache, that would bring me anxiety, that would give me stress, and that would make me want to run up there and challenge and stop all those things that are happening. But yesterday we celebrated the Annunciation. The impossible became possible, and that's what God does. And for this man who came to the disciples, he was asking the disciples to do something impossible. In his mind, it was not possible for his son to be delivered from the demon. And Jesus questions them. And he asked the man, if you believe God can do anything, for with God nothing is impossible. And what's the man say? I believe, help me with my unbelief. What a prayer. That is a prayer that is almost just as important as the Jesus prayer. Oh Lord, I believe, help me with my unbelief. Because there's been many times in my life where I've had flickers of doubt and flickers of unbelief that has made me and my journey so hard getting to where I need to be, and I end up doing things that I regret by turning to my passions instead of turning to the holiness of God. And Jesus rebuked that demon. And that demon was able to be cast out because Jesus was able to do the impossible. He's able to do the impossible. He can mend broken marriages. He can mend broken people. He can mend broken societies. He can mend anything that's possible. Because with God, everything is possible. And if we, who are Orthodox Christians, who are supposed to be Orthodox, right? Right thinking is what Orthodoxy is. It's right thinking. And many times we get confused with the fact, and we say, what religion do you belong to? I don't belong to a religion. I belong to a faith. I belong to a way of life. I belong to a right thinking. I believe in orthodoxy, the right way to think. Because if you start thinking correctly and you start focusing on yourself, because the only thing that you should be focusing on yourself, period, is conquering your passions. That's the only thing. It's just like the Garden of Eden. When Adam and Eve were exiled and they were given a choice, as I said, they were outside the garden, but they had full view of the garden the whole time. Full view. It wasn't closed off to them. They couldn't enter it, but they could see it. And in that garden was only one tree that they weren't able to eat. That was the first time fasting was ever introduced into humanity. Now that we're on the outside of the garden in the wilderness where we are, there is the antithesis again. There is only one place. There is only one being, the tree of life, Jesus Christ himself, that we are supposed to focus on every single aspect of our lives. Not what we think we know, not what we believe we know, but continually searching for God. Just like that ladder of divine ascent. Did it go all the way around so everybody could see it? Did everybody get to see the icon? Was it over here? Where did it end up? I'm going to have to teach my class a very good way that you have to continue passing the material, right? That ladder of divine ascent is something that I would challenge everybody. They made a more friendly version for the outside of the monastery, if you want to read that. But if you really want to understand what the heart and root of that is, and truly understand where you need to get to, that's one of the books that I recommend everybody read for Lent. I read it many years ago, and I should have read it again this year, but I at least brushed up on it enough to get some of the most important things out of it. Because that is our journey. That is our journey, and the whole focus is who is at the top of the ladder. Why do you think Christ is always here? Christ is always at the top of everything that we do. He's always at the top, the very highest part of the churches, because it is He that we are supposed to continually setting our face to, so we can conquer our passions, so we can get closer to Him, we can learn how to truly pray, and that we can get the final rung of our journey, which is what? What? Anybody know what the final rung is on the ladder of divine ascent? Love. But it's not just love. It's agape. It's agape love. It's godly love. It's able to, for me, to be able to see my wife knowing that she has passions in her life, and for me to be able to see her and love her even more because of the struggle that she has. Because that passion is only a small, tiny bit of who she is. The Christ within her is so great and so magnificent. That's who I work towards seeing every single day. And that's what I do for everybody. That's what I do for every single person. And that's my journey that I'm trying to do for myself. To see Christ within me. Because definitely, whenever anybody sees that, people have told me, I sure feel like I'm one of these guys that's falling off the ladder. Well, you know what? That means that you're being humble, because you're not thinking that you're on the ladder on your way to the journey. It means that you're thinking to yourself, I need to get back on the ladder and continue working towards my salvation. It's really, really hard to climb the ladder of divine ascent. It's hard, but it's not impossible. Because through Christ, He can do anything. And He was able to cast out that demon, restore that child to his former self, and restore that child to his parents, because He was able to do everything through Christ who strengthened, through God who strengthened Him. Christ and God and the Trinity, They're one and the same. And we must understand that the Holy Spirit is within us, and that through the Holy Spirit we are able to do everything through Christ who died for us on the cross. That day when Jesus was kneeling at the Garden of Gethsemane, when he asked for that cup to be passed from him, he was human. And he was asking. But at the very end, he said, "It's not my will, Lord, it's your will to be done." Because he came for one task only, to express God's love so much that he gave himself up for the life of the world to bring us to our salvation. Let us glorify and praise the name of